Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This paper, The Digital Mufassir, is less an examination of history than it is a manifesto for the future of the discipline of tafsir. Its starting point is the examination of a publication, which you know, Ruh al-Ma'ani of Shihab al-Din al-Alusi, which represents, as I argue, the culmination of the Ottoman tradition of Qur'an exegesis and is a highly influential source for modern works in the field of tafsir. Rapid developments in technology have affected people's engagement with the printed word and shifted their attention to new possibilities in knowledge acquisition. While this paper proceeds from a thought experiment which aims at understanding more thoroughly what it means to be an author of tafsir, it goes on to present a series of proposals which could cement the place of this exegetical masterpiece in the present day and beyond. Now, for the purposes of time, we will not spend much in discussing the life of Al-Alusi, and many of these details are known to many of you, but his period of life was, of course, in the early 19th century, and he reached the heights of Ottoman scholarly achievement and influence in his short and eventful life. And this work, Ruh al-Ma'ani, represents the culmination of his scholarly achievement. Ruh al-Ma'ani, one can argue, is the rightful successor to the master commentary of Shaykh al-Islam Abu Sa'ud Effendi of the 10th Hijri century or 16th Miladi century, in its thorough engagement with the philological tradition of Quranic exegesis, commonly described today in terms of tafsir bil-ra'i or exegesis by opinion, although this label requires some examination. Like Abu Sa'ud, Al-Alusi depended heavily on the Kashaf of al-Zamakhshari and also of the commentary of Al-Baydawi, which was based upon the Kashaf and drew also from Al-Razi and Al-Raghib al-Asfahani. Crucially, Al-Alusi engaged with these works directly and alongside their super commentaries, their Hawashi, which represented centuries of scrutiny, discussion, and debate built upon the works of Al-Zamakhshari and Al-Baydawi. As well as combining this approach with the narration tradition, for which he used As-Suyuti's collection, Ad-Dur al-Manthur, among other sources, he reconciled between the competing grammatical approaches of Zamakhshari and Abu Hayyan al-Andalusi. So all of this is to say that there is much reason behind a number of scholars describing this as an encyclopedic work. And this very nature of the work is what has invited the praise of scholars from the author's time and ever since. Both its vast scope and its remarkable conciseness in presenting debates over interpretations of the verses represent such an aid to later researchers as can hardly be overstated. In this respect, it may be said that Ruh al-Ma'ani is not only a magnificent achievement, but in fact a landmark in terms of its composition, which has not since met its match in print. And we could speak also, if we had more time, about some of the influence that it has had on other works in the Islamic East and West. But what we're getting towards is the thought experiment. If my argument is that Ruh al-Ma'ani represents the state of the art in the book form Quranic exegesis, this argument is coupled with the recognition that our rapidly changing world presents challenges and opportunities in the transmission of knowledge and information. This paper seeks to reconsider the very nature of authorship as it can be conceived and reconfigured in the 15th Islamic century, taking Al-Alusi's achievement as a case study of the multifaceted nature of tafsir authorship and the challenges of navigating the exegetical corpus as a whole. To this end, we shall explore an imaginary scenario. What if Imam Al-Alusi were to come to us in the present day, seeking help with producing a new edition of his Ruh al-Ma'ani? Or if we were to be transported back in time, together with our technologies, to help him achieve the aims of his tafsir project. The purpose in positing this scenario is twofold. because I know that you're thinking this is quite radical. First, it can bring to light some of the limitations of the linear book form, within which Al-Alusi, like his predecessors, was operating. Secondly, it can point the way to new methods of engaging with the materials contained in the tafsir corpus, nowhere more brilliantly and comprehensively than in Ruh al-Ma'ani. So the starting point, naturally, is to understand the needs of our mufassir. In reality, we have two routes to determining this: the author's own description in his introduction and inference from his authorial practice. Unfortunately, while his introduction contains various beneficial discussions and reveals some of the author's key positions regarding the Quran, it does not spell out much concerning his exegetical process. One may certainly understand that Al-Alusi prioritized mastery of the Arabic language for the interpreter of the Quran and dismissed the overemphasis of narrations by some, and apparently this could be in reference to Ibn Taymiyyah. So we are left with the inferential method as represented in various works which are known as Manahij al-Mufassirin, or the methodologies of exegetes. And we will not elaborate on some of the things that have been written about him in this regard. The approach that I've taken in considering the questions which led to the digital proposals is what I call tafsir anatomy. And tafsir anatomy, in short, is to break down the actual content of the work. First of all, dividing the commentary into topical chunks. And chunking the material into small pieces is already a key process towards making it more accessible in a digital format. When these chunks are placed in a table with columns under which we can place different annotations, each chunk is labeled in terms of its function. For example, this chunk is a narration. For example, a hadith or a narration from some of the earlier exegetes. This chunk is the first opinion of a list. This is an objection. This is a response to the objection. With that, then, we also have another column which is for the question which underlies this point that is being made. And this proceeds from an assumption that all of tafsir is answering questions. Questions either received by the mufassir or conceived in the mind of the mufassir. And this is a crucial point which I do not have time to elaborate on further. Another thing that we do in the tafsir anatomy is to divide the material into three broad categories, which I call pretext, text, and post-text. And I will let you use your imagination as to what these things mean. But I will talk a little bit about some of them later on. So the result from this is that I have determined 5 main needs that Al-Imam Al-Alusi may have raised with us if he were with us as his digital consultants. The first of these needs is to gather earlier opinions. And this is a very key feature, well-known feature of Ruh al-Ma'ani. Its extensive incorporation of statements of earlier scholars and indeed narrations from the prophets, companions, and adjacent generations. He also quotes from various books of tafsir and key hawashi, super commentaries, describing their various positions and debates in tremendous detail. So you can imagine the amount of effort that was required for him to gather these materials, as was the case for the exegetes that he used as his sources. Nowadays, and we can find in this edition, the Risala edition of the book, the editors have done a fairly effective job of citing references for Al-Alusi's quotations and making explicit some of the sources that he left oblique, although of course he does sometimes make explicit who he is referencing, such as when he says Shaykh al-Islam, he's referring to Abu Sa'ud, or he refers to Al-Imam, he's referring to Al-Fakhr al-Razi. But in many other cases, it is left unstated. And this is not a strange practice, this is not a new practice, nor even something that we would criticize him for. However, if he were in the modern time, we might have new standards of referencing in order to avoid a charge of plagiarism. In this case, the digital format can make this so much easier to source the quotes and also to provide the references, even to provide hyperlinks which take you to the original sources which are being quoted. And so this takes us immediately into a new way of engaging with these materials. We can now also determine, as researchers, the extent of text reproduction, which itself is valuable data in examining these works. The likes of Asbab al-Nuzul or other hadith narrations and hadith literature can be provided with references to the strength of those narrations, with references to the relevance of those narrations and what other scholars and authorities have said about them and their impact upon the commentary. So this is a brief introduction to the first need. The second need follows from this, and that is the representation of diverse interpretations. Another key aspect of his methodology is his presentation of a range of views under a single question, generally after expressing his own preferred interpretation. And so, in order to make sense of all this material, we need a kind of labeling system for these tafsir statements. So in this case, everything that is in Alusi would be labeled by the fact that it is in Alusi, and then its placement under the verse and its position. Is it the first thing that was mentioned, the second thing that was mentioned, the third opinion, the fourth opinion, and so on? And also the attitude of the Mufassir towards it. Because Al-Alusi very carefully describes his own position regarding what he quotes. He does not merely tell you everything that was said, but he will let you know whether he approves that statement, whether he criticizes it, or whether he completely dismisses it. And this is a problem sometimes people have when they're accessing works like this, and more so the commentary of Al-Razi, where it can be difficult to determine whether the author is citing his own opinion or merely quoting somebody else's opinion, which he may actually intend to refute. So these things can be made easier by providing a labeling system. I would not have time to elaborate on the idea behind the Tafsir Questions Chronological Index, but inshallah I hope that it will be an interesting title for another paper in the future. And same with the Tafsir Translation Matrix. All of this is to argue that we can repurpose the materials and reorganize the materials so that they can be accessed according to the question that is being addressed in the tafsir. And then when we access the question, we can access the opinions of a multitude of commentators and exegetes and mufassirin presented in chronological order. Only specifically the question, one question at a time, rather than the organizing principle of the ayah. Because at the current time, the best search engines which we have for tafsir provide you the information under the basic unit of the ayah. And under one ayah, there may be many pages of material which you have to sift through to find the specific question that you're looking for. The third need which I would like to speak of is connecting the whole Quran. And it's not something that is at all unique to Al-Alusi's tafsir, but like most or all exegetes, it is a concern of his to consider how a word is being used in different parts of the Quran and how a concept is described in different verses. And this is broadly described as Tafsir al-Quran bil-Quran or intra-Quranic exegesis. Now, these materials, which could be accessed by the exegete's own memory or could be accessed through printed concordances, now can be accessed even more easily with the digital means. So this means that the machine or the digital platform in the first place can prompt the mufassir, can be a use to him as he is considering the verse under question, that he can now access links to other verses which help him in his thought process in deciding what he wants to say. And then connecting the whole Quran also means connecting the different parts of his tafsir to each other. So very often they would say, and I have elaborated this point in Surah Al-Baqarah, or I intend to elaborate on this in Surah Al-Hijr. Now it would be ever the more easy for these things to be interconnected and to avoid the need for repetition, because the linkage is there literally at the fingertip or at the eyeball of the reader. The fourth of our 5 needs that we are going to talk on is the need to distinguish between the core tafsir and related studies. Now, in my process of living with Imam Razi and translating Tafsir al-Razi, many people have come to me and repeated this jibe that has been made about his book, فيه كل شيء إلا التفسير. that there's everything in there except tafsir. And of course, the famous response to this is فيه كل شيء مع التفسير. So there's everything in there along with tafsir. This basic question comes back to whether we accept a narrow definition of tafsir or a broad definition of tafsir. A broad definition of tafsir would say that in a book like Ruh al-Ma'ani or Mafatih al-Ghaib also of al-Razi, فيه كل شيء هو التفسير. Everything that is tafsir is in the book, and everything that's in the book, we will call it tafsir because the Mufassir has placed it there and has attempted to convince us that it is tafsir. So this would be the broadest definition. At the same time, we have to recognize that there are some things which touch on the very core of what tafsir is about, explicating and clarifying the meanings of the words of the Quran. And then there are things that branch off and may become quite distant from this essential core need in tafsir. So technology can allow us to organize this more clearly and to see what is pertinent to the words themselves. This is the text analysis. What is pertinent to locating those words in their context? This is what I call pretext. And what are the things that follow from the text in one way or another? And this, according to what I understand from Al-Maturidi's explanation, is what he refers to as ta'wil. So what the text leads to and what is derived from it. So all of this can be achieved through separating what is the core of the tafsir and then the thematic discussions and short essays which sometimes form pages and pages in, if you turn to ayah number 7 of Ali Imran, muhkamat, mutashabihat, you will find sometimes pages and pages or almost a short book inside a number of the tafasir. So these can also be separated in a different way when we are freed from the simple linear book format. The fifth and final need is to open the door to modern hawashi. This is not necessarily a need which Al-Alusi would express directly, because it is so dependent on a modern imagination affected by global communications and the democratization of knowledge. However, the fact that he participated in the Hashia tradition means that he certainly appreciated the value of cumulative discussions and debates spanning over the centuries, as commentaries were written upon commentaries. Modern technologies allow for open source participation in the commentarial tradition. At the first level, this means allowing experts to comment on Al-Alusi's text. The comment threads linked to a specific sentence of Ruh al-Ma'ani would become a forum for cumulative debate. And this would solve a problem that is mentioned by Professor Taha in his paper, as it would be made clear from the position of each comment to what and to whom it is responding. This technological solution could be seen as the revival and modernization of the Hashia tradition. Finally, taking the democratization principle further, the doors could be opened to comments from the general public, albeit demarcated from the learned commentary. The purpose would be to encourage participation in a culture of reflection upon the Quran, with the best contributions being recognized and promoted by experts. The forum could also become a place for questions to be asked and answered, extending the core activity of tafsir into the next generations in a participatory manner which was impossible until the modern day. There is some reason to suppose that Imam Al-Alusi would welcome these developments. Despite his sometimes acerbic critical remarks about earlier opinions, he is often explicit in inviting the reader to think for himself or herself. We can hypothesize and hope that direct engagement with the Quran, its commentaries, and an ongoing tradition of debate can engender a wider culture of critical and constructive thinking. Thank you for your time.